After about 2 weekends and a handful of evenings after work, I've finished my short horror film fully made in Unreal Engine. And let me tell you, I learned a lot from it. What did I learn? Well, let's jump into that. 1. Cheating. For this mini movie, I knew I wanted a long hallway. Originally, I had a rundown hospital in mind, but I decided to change this into a mineshaft. For the most part, building my scene was fairly easy. However, I was really struggling to get these lights to light up the scene correctly. I figured it was because the entire light was one model using one texture, so I found a new light on Fab, but this still wasn't working. In the end, I decided to study the example level scene that comes with the mine pack. Turns out they bloomin' cheat with point lights, so that's exactly what I did. However, the light wasn't quite working the way I wanted, so I added a spotlight to each light too. 2. Splines. Splines are incredibly useful, but before this project I didn't really understand how to use them. One could argue I still don't, but at least I now know how to use a pre-made one. To use a spline, drag it out into your scene, then press the N node and while holding the Alt key, drag the node out to duplicate it. Repeat this as much as you need. You can then press any of the nodes to further adjust the spline. Very useful and very simple. 3. Retargeting rigs. Now, animation is hard, really hard, and if your skeletal mesh doesn't match the animation skeleton, you're in for a rough time. That's where retargeting comes in. Retargeting is where you retarget your skeletal mesh of the object you want to use with the animation skeleton. Retargeting is often laborious and difficult, but thankfully, Unreal has a fairly straightforward way that I used for this project. First, I found the animation I wanted on Mixamo, an incredible resource for free animation and 3D characters. Second, I found this Paragon character I wanted to use from Fab, who looks sick and has a mask. To retarget the Paragon character to my Mixamo animation, I first make a new folder and call it Retarget. I then find the Mixamo animation sequence, right click, and go to Retarget Animations. In the target skeletal mesh, I find my Paragon character. I then go to Export Retarget Assets and find my Retarget folder. I should now have 3 items: the IK rig made from the skeleton of the Mixamo animation, the IK rig made from the skeleton of my Paragon character, and the IK retargeter where we can see how the rigging has worked. Now if we play the Mixamo animation, we can see both skeletons move correctly. In fact, I can now use any Mixamo animation that I need. Now I can select Export Selected Animations, and I will have a usable Mixamo animation with my Paragon character. This is by far the easiest way I have found to retarget animation rigs. I'm not sure if it always works this flawlessly, especially if you have a much larger character, but that's an issue for future me. 4. Skeletal Mesh Editor. Speaking of issues, you might have noticed that in my animation, the character's weapons are floating. To remove these, I did find that you could do it via blueprints, which was easy enough. However, I have no idea how to use that blueprint within my animation. So I went to the second best option, which was to find the Skeletal Mesh Editing Tools plugin. By enabling this plugin, now when I go to my skeletal mesh, these editing settings appear on the left. Using the Paint New Polygroups brush, I go over the area of the weapons. When I'm happy with what I've selected, I press Accept. I then go to Shape Modeling, Polygroup Edit, select the weapon, and then find Delete Faces, making sure to press Accept once again. I repeat this until I have one tiny piece of the weapon left over. The problem with this tiny piece is that if I delete it, it messes up all my textures. So to solve this, I simply move the location of the piece into the body of my character, so that it's hidden. Lastly, I needed to actually update the skeleton so it no longer had the points for the weapons. I go to Edit Bones, find the correct bones that relate to each weapon, and simply select Remove. I repeat this again, and again, and again. Now when I go to my animation, I select my new skeletal mesh, and perfect! 5. Parenting objects. When you parent something, it essentially attaches itself to your chosen objects. It's similar to grouping, but for whatever reason grouping is not that useful, especially when working in a level sequence. To parent an object, in this case, you simply drag the light over the glow stick and wait for the green tick. You can now see that they are attached. Now when I play my animation, the pair of objects move correctly and together. You can also parent objects to bones on a character to make them hold something by the exact same method. Only difference is, now a drop down menu will appear, so you can choose your bone. 6. Matching bones for animations. If you have an animation that flicks your character back to its original starting point, you can fix this by right clicking on the animation and selecting Match with this bone in previous clip, and select a bone. Usually the pelvis or hips are best, but sometimes the spine or even the feet will work better. Now, your animation won't keep flicking backwards. 7. Slowing animation. In this example, the character is coming into frame a bit too fast. So to slow down my animation, I can right click, go to Properties, and find Play Rate. I can now adjust this, and it feels a bit more natural, as if he's coming to a stop. And that's most of the new things I learned in Unreal for this project. In terms of editing though, I would just like to shout out Pixabay. I learned about it recently, and I've only used sound effects and music from Pixabay for this project. It's a really great resource, filled with high quality stock assets, and it's completely free. So I would highly recommend checking them out. Thanks for watching. Why not subscribe?